are going to have fog. When you're doing your beginning flight thing in the morning, you've got to make sure that those are not together. So you do it.
And here we've got trying to emulate what Holmes might have done in his laboratory, adding a little secret ingredient here.
So we've got pea soup coming up.
We're trying to make a pea soup fog. Yes.
There it goes.
Some green food coloring. So, drum roll, please.
All right. Is that it?
Yes.
Now, that appears, well, I'll lift the top off and see if some fog comes out.
Okay, yeah,
It's looking a little foggy in there.
it's coming in. Whoa.
Wow,
okay.
fog.
Just barely.
My wife refers to a friend on the wall there. Okay, now.
Anyway, that's our.
Thank you, very good. All right. I have made some assignments for the store today. We'll do the quiz after some of these assignments, and the people have been very gracious to say, yeah, I'll pitch in and help you out, because they know how much help I need in doing the presentation. So can we?
If you're ready for the presentation.
I'm ready for the presentation.
I'll send around this can of London fog for a close up.
Pea soup. Okay, we're going to go full screen up here. This is the Bruce Partington plans, and it's from his last vow. The last book.
The last collection.
The last collection of stories.
The Facebook was after that.
Oh, was it?
Facebook.
Well, this is like 1917, so it's well into the 20th century. Your internet connection is unstable. Is that okay?
Yeah, say okay. It should be.
Which one do I hit to get it go? Any of them?
Right arrow or the
Right
space
arrow,
bar.
It's not going.
Sorry. Space bar.
Spacebar, yeah, okay. Now these come in slowly. If you watch your screen, you'll see. And then the first assignment we made was to start the program with London Fog. So, Tom Vikstrom, you're up, sir. Thank you.
If I go too long, please sound a foghorn.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes over here. Okay, we're timing.
Try to include the abstract as well. Probably should.
Yeah, go ahead.
A heavy London fog permeates the plot and mystery of the Bruce Partington plans story. It seems omnipresent. The fog even obscures a potential eyewitness from seeing the details of the murder. Here's a quick abstract of the mention of fog throughout the story. The story opens with this description. In the third week of November in the year 1895, a dense yellow fog settled down upon London. From the Monday to the Thursday, I doubt whether it was ever possible from our windows in Baker Street to see the loom of the opposite houses. Thus, that's end quote. Thus, the weather conditions evidently were oppressive enough to compel Holmes and Watson to be shut-ins at 221B Baker Street for 4 days straight. Watson writes, but when, for the fourth time after pushing back our chairs from breakfast, we saw the greasy, heavy brown swirl drifting past us and condensing in oily drops upon the window panes, my comrade's impatient and active nature could endure this drab existence no longer. It seems the murder victim, Arthur Cadogan West, a loyal employee of the government, had left his home suddenly on Monday night, the first night that week with the heavy fog. He was last seen with his fiancée, Miss Violet Westbury, whom he left abruptly in the fog about 7:30 that evening. He was found the next morning dead along train tracks near a curve. It is assumed the man, dead or alive, either fell or was pushed from a train. A passenger on another train believes he heard a thud around 11:40 p.m., but there was dense fog and nothing could be seen. After inspecting the train tracks and location where the body was found, Holmes and Watson traveled to the house of a famous official in a fine villa with green lawns stretching down to the Thames River. Quote, as we reached it, the fog was lifting and a thin, watery sunshine was breaking through. End quote. By evening, however, the fog is back. In visiting the fiancée of the deceased, she recounts that the evening of the murder, while they were together, we were about to go to the theater. The fog was so thick that a cab was useless. We walked and our way took us close to the office. Suddenly, he darted away into the fog. And then about 12 o'clock, we heard the terrible news. At Holmes's next investigative stop, the victim West's workplace, the clerk also mentions weather conditions the night of the murder as being a possible factor towards not having observed anything unusual. He says, of course, the fog was very thick. Holmes continues to gather evidence and hypothesizes. We will now suppose that as he went to the theater with the young lady, he suddenly, in the fog, caught a glimpse of the same foreign agent going in the direction of the office. He, West, was an impetuous man, quick in his decisions. Everything gave way to his duty. He followed the man. As Holmes and Watson continued the detective work in the evening, the fog still hung about and screened us with its friendly shade. Note the term friendly shade, reference to the fog, no longer a nuisance since they were not longer. Story evolves and Colonel Walter, who was captured and questioned, tells his confession. He says, it was thick fog and one could not see 3 yards. Explaining the murder and circumstances, the perpetrator reiterates the fog conditions. It was so thick that nothing could be seen, and we had difficulty in lowering West's body onto the train. That sounds like a real pea souper.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
So one of Arthur Conan Doyle's friends, a Scots-American author, Robert Barr, who wrote an 1892 book, The Doom of London, wrote, fog is simply a watery vapor rising from the marshy surface of the land or from the sea or condensed into a cloud from saturated atmosphere. London, at the end of the 19th century, consumed vast amounts of soft bituminous coal for the purpose of heating rooms and preparing food. In the morning and during the day, clouds of black smoke were poured forth from thousands of chimneys. When a mass of vapor arose in the night, these clouds of smoke fell upon the fog, pressing it down, filtering slowly through it, and adding to its density. The sun would have absorbed the fog, but for the layer of smoke that lay thick above the vapor and prevented the rays from reaching it. In fact, a review of London newspapers dated 1895, the date our story is set in, finds many references to fog, not only over London, but throughout the region. Quoted here is one pithily stated November 7th, 1895 news report from the Pall Mall Gazette. November is with us again. It seems only the other day that we bade him goodbye for a year, and here he is again already. The same old November with the same old fogs. At least they look just the same, a trifle dirtier perhaps, but that is easily accounted for by the fact that they've had a whole year to collect more smut and dirt. One may be able to eat one's fog and have it too. In fact, the difficulty seems to be to avoid both eating it and having it.
2 minutes.
We can hardly go out into the London streets in this foggy weather without eating great lumps of fog.
Yeah.
We hardly sit by our own fireside without imbibing it. The state of our lungs and insides generally after a prolonged diet of fog must be something frightful. Like the lungs of the sheep in London parks, they must be perfectly black. What is or was this London fog? Fog is simply a cloud that has formed near the ground. The contributing conditions are simply water vapor and cold air. Sometimes that air caused to be cold from cold ground. No doubt the mighty Thames River helped usher in fog conditions regularly as well. Let's see, weather professionals know there are several different types of fog. Dense fog, when you can't see further than 50 meters. Thick fog, when you can't see further than 180 meters. Mist, when the fog is so thin that you can see only 1 kilometer away. And there's also fog bow. A fog bow looks like a rainbow, but is pale and hazy instead of colorful.
So it's his last bow in this case.
Yeah, right, there you go.
Might be,
Ooh,
might be.
okay. There you go.
Yes, notable, these common definitions do not include the pea soup fog, but we have that with us today.
Okay,
So that's essentially it. Charles Dickens wrote extensively, somewhat about fog in his books. There was actually in that era, earlier times, link boys who carried torches around the streets of London
Huh.
to help light the way for pedestrians.
okay. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Wrapping.
Wrapping.
There are 59 occurrences of the word fog in the canon.
In the
That's
can.
based on keyword search.
Okay. Any pea soups?
Yes, there is.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Very good. All right. Thank you. Ella,
Tom and I, when I was reading about it in the book, that reminded me to look up something.
yeah,
It was the Great Smog of 1952
52.
in London, led to 4,000 deaths during the smog and another 8,000 attributed not long afterward.
Oh, my
Led to
gosh.
the first major Clean Air Act in Britain 2 years later.
Oh, Bill?
Well, 1952 brings up the fact that in 1951, there was the London Festival of London, which there was a Sherlock Holmes exhibition over at Abbey House.
Right.
They moved it to New York in 1952. And one of the displays that was there is that there was an elaborate effort to bottle some London fog. They sent it to New York to be part of that exhibition in 1952.
Really? Oh, gosh. Mr. Schwartz, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just a little note on the London fog. I lived in London in 66 and 67. And I was looking forward to having London fogs, which I didn't see.
Oh.
But I bought a new car when I was living in London. And the London Air was notwithstanding the Clean Air Act that they passed, you know, the atmosphere was so polluted that I got little indentations in my paint surface from all the crap in the air.
Wow, good, great.
That was 66.
Dave?
Some of y'all may have lived in Nashville long enough to remember the term Smoky Joe. Back in the 40s and early 50s, people from the country would come in Nashville and complain about the smog being so bad. Their nose would be full of black soot when they left home.
Oh, really? Bad. Okay, let's move ahead. Next person up. Oh, here we go. Nice. Billy Fields. Billy Fields is going to tell us about Mycroft Homes. He's a big part of this story. Billy, are you there?
But unmute him.
Just a minute.
Hang on, we're gonna get it.
Go ahead, Billy. He froze up.
Oh, we may have
Up there
to-
in the corner, he's not moving.
Okay, it's, we're gonna go ahead with Drew Thomas, I'm sorry. Arthur Cadogan West.
Arthur Cadogan West. Who was Arthur Cadogan West? Yeah, sure. This right here.
He's back now. I muted it.
Oh, that's the music. There you go. Sorry.
Okay, Drew.
So who was Arthur Cadogan West and what were people saying about him? We know he worked for the government and the first news we get of him, well, as Tom already pointed out, his body was found next to a train. He had technical papers from the government on him, on his person, and he was suspected of trying to sell those. In the government, he worked with those papers. He had, he was in charge of them. Except he didn't really have access to them without the help of others. There were 3 keys you had to get to the papers. There was a guy who had 1 key who could open the outside door, another one, the inside door, another one for the safe. So I don't think he was, unless they colluded, he couldn't get in himself. But the first word we have of it is when, of this case, is when Mycroft sent a telegram to Holmes and says, I'm coming to your house, which is earth shattering,
Yeah.
to talk about Arthur Cadogan West. And Holmes says to Watson, I never heard of him, I don't know who he is. And Watson says, oh, I heard the name, what was, oh, yeah, it's in the paper, he was the body that was found next to the train. So Mycroft comes, he lays the case before Holmes, what happened, the papers disappeared. And Holmes surmises that he had to sell West was the one who broke in and took the papers and wanted to sell them to a foreign agent. And he said, let us take that as our working hypothesis. And Mycroft says, that's a great idea, but I have some reservations about that. He needed those 3 keys to break in. On the night in question, he would have had to have an appointment with the agent who was going to buy the papers from him. He would have wanted the night to be clear, and yet that's the night he purchased the tickets to take his fiancee to the theater. So he couldn't. There were objections to the hypothesis. Holmes and Watson then viewed a number of people, the senior clerk at the agency, who gave a high regard. He says West was hot-headed, but he was dedicated to his work and he was top-notch and all that. Sir James Walter was the head of the whole agency. He would have had all 3 keys. His brother, Valentine, was his brother. He would have maybe had access. It was a top secret place, but he would have had access. He was on the premises at times. They interviewed, Holmes and Watson interviewed West's mother and his fiancée. The mother was very distraught and had very little to say, if anything. And the fiancée, Holmes actually called West a traitor. If he took those papers, he's a traitor. And his fiancée is saying, no, he was a patriot. If you can only save his honor, please investigate. So that's what happened. That was the beginning of the case. As Holmes investigated further, he found that West was probably not on the train, and there were all sorts of theories. So Lestrade had a theory that the person he sold it to, or was maybe they had a disagreement with the price, couldn't settle it. West came back on the train, and the guy came with him and murdered him and took the papers. But some of the papers were found on him, and others were not. So, maybe he murdered him on the train, but he didn't have a ticket. And Holmes says, in my experience, you can't get on the train. You can't even get into the place without a ticket. There are people who have to show the ticket to them. So Holmes finally comes to the idea that he was placed on the roof of the train. And let me know when I'm approaching my 10 minutes.
I will.
Okay, so, but the body was found with a terrible wound, but no bleeding, no blood. And it must have been placed on the train, must have been killed earlier. And then Holmes and Watson well, Holmes figures out where it was, who the agent was. It was Oberstein. He had a house. The back of his house, if you get in the house, there's a window, you open the windowsill, the trains come by. And there's some kind of a schedule where trains, I guess they're directed by, you know, they come to a place and they stop for a few minutes.
How convenient, right?
And so, and when Holmes does get into the place with Watson, he shows him, he says, here's where the body was placed. You can see charcoal from the steam and the charcoal smoke on the sill, but there are smudges and you can see where it was placed and thrown onto the train. So that was conclusion he came to. And then I guess we all know what the outcome was, who the villain was.
Yeah, just stay with Cadogan West, so we don't need to get into the characters. People are gonna talk about those.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's it, but Holmes does confront somebody who he suspects. Any other questions or are we gonna get right into the,
We're going in soon.
okay.
Let's go, thank you, very good. We're gonna go with Woolwich Arsenal, which is important. And by the way, we haven't mentioned it, we're gonna get to it, but the Bruce Partington plans for a submarine, an important, instrument of war that, if the plans get out, it's gonna be serious for the, British government. So let's talk about Woolwich Arsenal, please. This would be Dean Richardson, Home Sheriff.
All right, first let me point out, they would pronounce it Woolwich, dropping that second W.
Huh, Thank
And,
you.
of course, while it is a central part of the story, it's not really visited in the course of it, except maybe briefly. The Royal Arsenal, Woolwich, was an establishment on the south bank of the River Thames in Woolwich, in southeast London. It was used for the manufacture of armaments and ammunition, proofing, that is, testing equipment to make sure it worked, and explosives research for the British Armed Forces. It was originally known as the Woolwich Warren, having begun on land previously used as a domestic warren for raising rabbits on the grounds of a mid-16th century Tudor house called Tower Place. In 1805, at the suggestion of King George III, the entire complex became known as the Royal Arsenal. Its constituent elements retained their independence. The Napoleonic Wars prompted an increase of activity at the arsenal, which affected all areas of its operation. By 1854 and the beginning of the Crimean War, the old laboratory square had been roofed over to serve as a vast machine shop at the heart of what was now a munitions factory. The narrow gauge Royal Arsenal Railway was opened in 1873, complemented later by a standard gauge network connected to the main line. Electricity arrived in the arsenal in the 1870s. Initially, it was used for lighting, but it soon was used to power all kinds of machinery on the complex. The arsenal was still made up of separate divisions. The manufacturing departments, which soon came to be called ordnance factories, were each overseen by a largely independent superintendent who answered directly to the director of artillery and stores. The Royal Laboratory continued to use hundreds of lathes to manufacture ammunition, including bullets, shrapnel shells, fuses, percussion caps, shot, and shells. The Royal Carriage Department continued to build gun carriages with metal fast replacing wood for this purpose. And the Royal Gun Factory expanded still further with a new rolling mill and associated boiler house and forge being erected in the early 1870s and a huge boring mill 10 years later. These were probably the most recent additions at the time of the story in 1895. The sprawling arsenal site is now one of the focal points for redevelopment in the Thames Gateway zone. Parts of it have been used to build residential and commercial buildings, so it's certainly not what it was at that time.
Well, great,
So
thanks, sir.
that's it.
Very good. Woolwich Arsenal.
Woolwich.
Woolwich, okay. I understand that Billy has gotten back with us. He is unfrozen. And we're going to hear a little bit about Mycroft Homes. Watch your screen, please.
Okay. I'm assuming you can hear me now. Hello? Hey, Jim? Okay. Mycroft Holmes, we know really about him from a couple of stories mainly. We know about him from the Greek Interpreter, and we know from Bruce Partington. He has brief appearances in The Final Problem as well as The Adventure of the Empty House. He is older than Holmes by about 2 years. He is, I'm sorry, 7 years. And by Holmes' account, he's a smarter brother, which is a little strange. Holmes described him as having a higher degree of deductive powers, but he had no desire for physical activities, so he didn't perform any detective work. Uh, this is the way Holmes described him in the Greek Interpreter. He has no ambition, no energy. He will not even go out of his way to verify his own solutions, and would rather be considered wrong than take the trouble to prove himself right. Again and again, I have taken a problem to him and have received an explanation, which afterwards proved to be correct. But it just didn't matter to him one way or the other, so he just never checked it out. We know that he worked for the government. We don't really know exactly what he did in the government. In fact, at one point, Holmes actually said he was the government, but he was described as the most indispensable man in England. But his salary was about 66 thousand. I'm sorry, 450 pounds, which would be about 66,000 pounds today, which is like $85,000. Again, we'll keep going. We want to talk a little about that in a moment. He lived in Pall Mall. He was actually able to walk to work in the morning over to Whitehall. He was a member of the Diogenes Club, and he was actually helped found that. He's described as being having a faraway introspective look. A much larger and stouter man, even though he looked a little like Holmes. I'll talk a little about the Diogenes Club because since he was a founder, but it was a club where you'd go, and if you remember, you didn't talk to anybody. You sat down, you minded your own business, and kind of a misanthrope seemed to be maybe the ones there. There was a visitor's room, so if Holmes got to visit, that's where he would go. But he will talk a little about, and I want to make sure we get in my 2 minutes. He did work for the Foreign Office. We know that much. The Foreign Secretary, which would be similar to the Department of State in the United States, would handle intelligence. They would handle relations with other countries, that sort of thing. And we know that every decision that was made in government, not just the foreign decisions, but every decision went through Mycroft. And some people might even call him sort of an accountant or an analyst of some kind. Others were called specialists, but he was the specialist in everything. If a minister needed information, whether it was about the Navy, India, anything going on, it probably was fed through Mycroft. Someone wrote that he was a shortcut, a convenience. He had made himself essential. He basically created his own job. And many people say he actually decided national policy. Now, there's a few more things we know about him, but we don't know that much about him. I want to speculate just a moment because I've got a moment left, I think, maybe. He was born in 1847. Being born in 1847 would have been the same year as another person was born, and a fellow named Archibald Philip Primrose. Now, that doesn't ring much of a bell, probably. He was the 5th Earl of Rosebery. He went to the Christ Church at Oxford University, but he was the Prime Minister of England during the time of this particular story. It's very likely that Mycroft would have had contact with him. It's also very likely, since they were exactly the same age, they could have gone to school together. We don't know that. But the fact that Primrose is the same age, he was a prime minister at the time, who else would he have depended on but his friend from school, Mycroft? I could go on. I'm not going to because Jim will ding me, and I don't want to do that. So thank you. Carry on. What's next?
Okay.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What do you, the speculation that Mycroft was the father of Nero Wolfe?
Well, now if he was I mean, you know, I think I want to believe it, but here's why I think it probably wasn't. Mostly because he was basically a introvert, maybe shy, and the fact that he would go to the Diogenes Club at night, he was not going out to the streets as much as Holmes and Watson were. So it's possible, but I'd say he was misanthrope, maybe the right word for him. He didn't trust a lot of people. It didn't seem he didn't want to be around a lot of people. He wanted to work through the project, solve the problems, and go and let somebody else do the rest of the work.
George has a question.
The
Physically,
Diogenes,
I was gonna say, physically, they were both heavy men, though. We have to remember that. Mycroft was a big guy, and so was his supposed son, so.
Absolutely.
is the Diogenes Club still in existence?
Yeah.
That's the question.
That was Sandy.
Sandy. Billy, did you hear the question?
Yeah, there is a Diogenes. It's actually a restaurant now. I'm not sure there is actually a club. It was described as a fictional club, I believe. But there is a restaurant or a club of some kind that is in London today that still carries that name.
Okay.
There is an author in England, Kim Newman, who's written a series of stories and novels about the Diogenes Club and incorporated Holmes and other Victorian era characters into the stories. So,
Okay. Thanks, Billy. Good job.
Thank you.
I've asked, yeah, give him a hand. I've asked Jay Lou to help us know a word and a little bit of an idea about Charing Cross Hotel. All right, my dear, you're on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice and loud, nice and loud.
Oh, okay. So in this story, the Charing Cross Hotel was mentioned toward the very end of the story.
Right.
And that's when like Colonel Walter kind of ruined the stories for you.
good.
Colonel Walter was caught and interrogated by Holmes. And then toward the end, he was asked by Holmes to write a letter to the spy Hugo Oberstein to lure him back to England. So this letter reads, "Therefore, I shall expect to meet you in the smoking room of the Charing Cross Hotel at noon on Saturday. Remember that only English notes or gold will be taken." And then later on, it was very briefly mentioned in the story that Hugo was caught later. But in some of the TV series, they made it into more of a bigger scene of a, bigger action movie.
Right.
So talking about the Charing Cross Hotel, we want to first touch on the Charing Cross first. That's where the hotel got their name from. So Charing Cross is a junction in the Westminster, London, and it's the Westminster, London. The Charing Cross was, since the 19th century, was considered the center of London, and that was when the distance were measured. Whenever they are measuring the distance from London, they're measuring really the distance to Charing Cross, and that's where there were 6 routes that all meet there, and it gave the Charing. Well, I'm sure most of you know Charing means river bend. And cross referenced the Eleanor Cross that were erected there from the 1400s to 1647. And it was later destroyed by the government at that time. And it was replaced by a Charles I statue.
Okay.
And then Charing Cross is where the Charing Cross station was at. And the station was opened in 1864. And it was one of the main stations that Holmes and Watson took whenever they go to Kent. And then that's also, we'll talk a little bit about the hotel, but right across the hotel was whenever they have, urgent telegrams are sent, is that across the street from that hotel.
Hmm.
So the Charing Cross station was, obviously a large and busy railway station located close to, Charing Cross. And it was opened in 1864, and then the 1865 was when the Charing Cross Hotel was opened. The hotel was originally designed by Edward Middleton Barry and constructed by the Lucas brothers. It opened its door on May 15th, 1865, and it gave the Charing Cross station a frontage in the French Renaissance style. And for the hotel, when it was first built, it was basically, it's the very first railway station in London, and it's built as a symbolic sign for the railroad industries. And here is a picture of the hotel and the original
Oh, nice.
design. And then, so during the Second World War in the 1950s, the upper two floors were damaged during the bombing of London. So it was reconstructed in 1953 for the upper two floors, and it was designed by F.J. Wells and Son. And then over the years, almost 160 years of the hotel, it has changed ownership multiple times, and therefore has changed the names multiple times. So when I did the research, I saw like the Grand Hotel at Charing Cross, Railway Terminus Hotel to the Charing Cross Railway, Thistle Charing Cross Hotel, Ambut Hotel Charing Cross, and then most recently in 2021, the hotel was acquired by this group called Claremont Group. So now it's called the Claremont London at Charing Cross. That's the hotel name.
But they still have Charing Cross in there, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's the key.
Charing Cross.
All right.
And then when the hotel was first built and opened the door, it had about 26 private rooms, and it costed about 27 pence a night. And I just looked at their website. Right now, they have actually two hotels side by side. The original one that's 2 Hour Story has about 250 bedrooms and over 7 floors. And the cheapest room I can find is about $220 a night. Talking about inflation. Just among the regular visitors of the hotel, our own Sir Arthur Conan Doyle frequented the hotel throughout the 1920s, and it's one of his favorite hotels and has been mentioned several times in various stories. So I mentioned that obviously most notably this is the hotel where the spy got caught, and then across the street that's where they send urgent telegrams, and then I think Watson also banked across the street from that hotel. And then one of the most well-known stories, obviously our Kathy is not here, but Irving Adler was first introduced in the story as a resident at the Charing Cross Hotel.
Oh, okay.
And also that's where she and her husband made their way to the continent. That was the stop. So this is it's a little bit about the Charing Cross Hotel. And right in front of the hotel, when they rebuilt in the 1865 as well, they rebuilt a Queen Eleanor Cross. That's kind of 200 meters away from the original one. So it's a picture. And it's designed by the same architect.
I particularly asked Jay because she has yet to present one of our stories, and I said, maybe if we get her up to do a little bit of a paper, she'll see it's not too scary to present you. So.
It is scary.
Yeah. We're gonna have to get you to do a story before long. Okay, there's just a few other people or places that we need to talk about before we have our little quiz and wrap up the story. And let's see who's next. Bill Schwartz, the agony column of the Daily Telegraph. This is a key part of this story. Bill,
Okay, let me get here one.
Make this painless.
nice and loud so they hear you on the Zoom
I
and
only have one ball.
one volume. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna be brief because it's sort of a minor part of this.
Sure, that's great.
Story that we're brief. First of all, what I'm gonna do is tell you what the agony columns are and in some ways still were and are. Okay, and then I'll relate it to the story. Agony columns were classified ads in the 19th century, particularly the second half of the 19th century. And they were wildly popular in both the United States and even more so, I think, in the UK. They were individual, brief, sometimes anonymous ads in the classified section, particularly in Britain. There were the subject matter of the agony column were complaints and sometimes indiscretions, and sometimes a request for advice. And when they got into particulars of people, the origin of the word agony comes into play. In today's, I scattered around trying to find a little bit about agony columns today. You don't find them in classified ads anymore, but Dear Abby
Yeah.
probably would be a similar kind
Right.
of construction. The interesting part of the whole discussion about the agony columns for me was they apparently started originally in the back section of things, but almost immediately got transferred to the front page of the wall of papers, particularly in England. And to my absolute amazement, the London Times continued the agony columns were on the front page of the London Times up till 1966.
Wow.
1966.
Wow.
That's pretty wild.
And before Facebook, right?
I think so. The columns themselves could include codes, cryptograms, or mystery messages, depending what the writer wanted to convey. Typically, they were a few dozen words, okay? And that's the origin, the background of the agony column, okay? There's some characterizations about, particularly about the stories when the advertiser is seeking advice from other people. I'll read you these quotes. I don't have the authors of these quotes, but they're interesting. The whole romance contained in 4 little lines. 7 words that give a three-volume novel in a nutshell. These classified ads were wildly popular. Allegedly, even Queen Victoria read them. The people that responded that we know about to the agony column called agony aunts and agony uncles. Dorothy Dix was one. Eleanor Roosevelt apparently followed the columns very carefully. Dr. Ruth is another. Okay. Now, to relate it to the home story, the advantages of the homes there, and the advantages of using it as a communications medium are sort of obvious. Fast. You got a message you convey, you put it in the paper, and it shows up the next day. And given the transfer of the communications difficulties of the time frame of the home stories, that's really significant. The ads were easily placed. It wasn't difficult to get your ad placed in there. They were readily available for readers in very, very large circulations, because newspapers were far more important in the second half of the 19th century than they were today. And they were anonymous.
Oh, so they were anonymous, right?
Yeah, they were anonymous.
Okay.
Well, they didn't have to be anonymous, but is a practical matter.
Right, right.
Okay, and then I guess my final comment is just to note that in terms of advice to people with the personal problems, that it's continued to this day, although not on the front page of the New York Times of the test. Either having that previously mentioned.
Right. Great.
That's it for agony column.
Thank you very much. Those of you who know me know that I lived in John Shaw's life. He died in 94, but one of the things that he put in the Santa Fe paper was the found on Brixton Road, a gold ring, and it had to do with one of the stories. He said that if this resonates with you, meet me tonight at 8:30. We're going to talk about it. So that he was announcing one of his brother's three Moriarty meetings. Okay. All right, moving ahead. Okay. Mr. Besser, Professor Besser, sir, we're going to talk about one of the bad guys in this incident, right? Thanks, sir.
One of the bad guys, and we don't get to know about the bad guys until well into the story, almost halfway through, before Holmes, what I call, has an aha moment when he sits down and sort of reviews where he's at, and he realizes that West is probably not the fellow who took the papers. And he asks his brother, are there any agents? Are there any agents that would be interested in these papers? And he says, yes, there happens to be 3 that were in town. And one of them is Mr. Hugo Overstein. And he has a unique characteristic, I think, in that Hugo is mentioned in one other story.
Oh.
Right, he's mentioned as a possible character of interest in the second stain.
Oh.
Right, so it's interesting that you don't find that very often. I mean, Mycroft, I think, is mentioned in 3 or 4 of the. And here's a gentleman that's mentioned twice and has somewhat of a significant role possibly in each one of them. So what Holmes does, I think, is famously, as probably most of us would have done in the 70s or 60s and 80s, as we were driving around looking for something, we'd have had a paper map in the lap of our car while we were driving.
Oh, yeah.
And what does Holmes does? He has his maps out. And so he immediately sees that the metro trains go by where Hugo Overstein lives. And he famously does one of his things that Lestrade doesn't want to know about, and that he breaks into the Overstein residence, and he has Watson to join him at a, I think he almost calls it a questionable Italian restaurant, to come here and bring some tools, and they break in, and of course Watson doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but Holmes does. He breaks in, and I think the note is it's a very large house, not furnished very well. I think there's a desk and a chair or 2 in a room, and that's where he does his sleuthing and finds the window seal with the soot on it and the markings. He actually finds the blood stain in the entryway where Mr. West was bopped on the head, probably harder than what they intended to. And I think in Cardigan West, the part that sort of escaped me at first was he's hot-headed.
Oh,
So I think
yeah.
when he went in there boisterous and a very patriotic person, as we see, and he wasn't gonna take no for an answer of yes, what are you doing with my papers?
Right.
And so very bold. So I think also that we see that Hugo is shown to be very greedy. he has the plans. But he is led on by saying, I have overlooked an important detail, and you've probably already seen this already. So if you meet me at the Charing Cross at noon, we will get it. So he draws Hugo into London from where he is in Paris, trying to sell the plans. I think the other interesting piece is that Holmes also draws the spy into Hugo's house by saying, meet me here at midnight and we will do it, but you know, of course, he's a little late getting there. And as we know, we're sort of surprised, I think, at the true spy in the story of the Bruce Partington. And my last comment is that I think that in my mind, the vision of Hugo was a very large man dressed very dapperly, living in a house. And I think of in the movie Goldfinger, the gentleman there that drove the big boat, that sort of Hugo. Yeah, to me. So I think the interesting part to me is how Hugo Overstein is mentioned in two stories as a possibility, and very rare. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good job. Now, put your thinking caps on because I have some questions here.
Jim Bill had a.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I never really looked at the name or something like it. But Oberstein, do you think that there was meant to be a suggestion that the guy was Jewish?
Well, I was thinking German and Jewish.
Yeah, German and Jewish.
And so I think that when I tried to do a little bit of research, he wasn't called a spy. He was called an international agent. Right, and he worked on his own. He didn't work for a country. So he would have gone, and the other people mentioned there as international agents, I say is almost a career of being some people who would sell information, maybe a precursor to our own CIA or any other agency that works in information.
Let's go with the story synopsis right quick. Sherlock is bored with the crime scene in London. Is it due to the life-choking London fog? Holmes says, look out this window, Watson. See how the figures loom up, are dimly seen, and then blend once again into the cloud bank. The thief or the murderer could roam London on such a day as the tiger does the jungle, unseen until he pounces, and then evident only to his victim. It is fortunate for this community that I am not a criminal. Holmes is suddenly surprised by a visit from his brother Mycroft. Something is seriously afoot. Mycroft rarely changes his routine like this. A planet might as well leave the orbit. So, I have some serious questions about this. Here's a little more about the synopsis. Mycroft relates the story of Arthur Cadogan West. West was a civil servant found dead on subway tracks at Aldgate with plans of a top secret submarine on his person. According to Mycroft, the plans were kept in a safe whose keys are held by men considered to be above suspicion. Sir James Walter and Sidney Johnson. Arthur Cadogan West was known as a serious employee and Johnson's deputy. It is believed West stole the plans to sell them and was killed during the transaction. Here are some weak points that I find. We can discuss these if you like. I wondered about the sudden death of Sir James Walter, keeper of the secret plans, and one of two persons with a key to the safe. Not many people die knowing that they didn't do their job well. I don't think any Secret Service people died when Trump got shot. They were very embarrassed, but to die because of that, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Walter was old.
I was old. Now, wait a minute.
Yes, he was. He was
Dave and I resent that.
It wasn't, he probably told it a day, but it's hard to read.
Okay,
Now, here's what's said about James Walter.
yes.
He is thrown gray in the service. Is a gentleman, a favored guest in most exalted houses, and above all, a man who great business beyond suspicion.
Ah,
So he was an elderly man who did, he probably had a heart attack.
yeah, that's probably
He
right.
was also described, by the way, as a famous government expert, which is my investiture name that I'm interested in.
Really?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
just point out though, it could also have been suicide or fratricide.
Ooh,
So it's
whoa,
left open.
yeah,
There's no resolution in that.
that's true. Well, it's an interesting piece. Okay, now this really bothered me. This person heard a thud outside the train and he knew it sounded like a body being thrown off the train. Now, I don't know what it sounds like when you throw a body
Could you?
off a train, but did someone actually hear this? Do you have any thoughts about what a body sounds like when it falls off a train? Dave?
Well, I think the thud though, was somebody on the train heard something on the roof. And I guess that's when they sort of dropped the body.
Oh, okay,
Is that your all's reading of that?
that's good.
That's what I thought. I thought it was not falling off.
Yeah.
The
I
hollow
think
roof.
that's when the thud.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
So
that's-
he
There's
didn't
too
think
much noise
anything
from
of
the
it.
train to hear the body fall off the
Right,
train
right,
itself.
that's a good point. Thank you, that helps me, okay, now. The fog is mixed through the story all the way, and people come and go and disappear. I guess he's trying to make a point about the fog, but it seems like an easy out for Conan Doyle to just make somebody disappear into the fog and then clean it up later. Do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah,
Well, it's literally atmospheric.
okay. Oh, yeah, I like that. Atmospheric. Let's hear it for Alan.
Well, the mention of the coal burning, I mean, and that type of coal is high in sulfur, and that's what it caused the yellow, brownish tint
Okay,
to it. And your dents on your car were acid, sulfuric acid formed by the,
well, so the book that Tom over here read is very interesting. You might want to check it out. Let's see, is it in the? Where is that? I don't know. Is it out here somewhere?
It was lost in the fog.
Okay, we'll find that later.
A minor comment about one
Yeah.
of Holmes's colleagues, Albert Hampton.
Yes,
One of Marjorie Allison's best known or most admired Campion books, I think refers back to your quote earlier from the story about the tiger of the criminal.
yes.
And that, of course, is the Tiger in the Smoke, the novel where the smoke,
Really?
of course, is an old nickname for London.
Oh, okay. I like that. It's the Tiger in the Smoke.
Great title. It's also a movie based on it.
Yes, go ahead.
One other novel related to that, titled In the Fog by Richard Harding Davis, which was published around 1905, recently has been reissued as part of this Library of Congress crime series that Leslie Klinger is the editor for. And I just read that a few months ago. It's also, everything revolves around a night that's so foggy that people get lost in it. And there's a mystery, maybe a murder and several stories involved with it.
Hmm.
It's a very clever, short, quick read that I recommend if you can find it.
Well, the fog was a real thing and writers have, through the years, have used it in a variety of ways. Are there red herring clues pointing to Cadogan West? You think that he is unfairly treated in the story, or was Watson just trying to, get the thoughts going toward his way? I mean,
No, he was literally framed
yeah.
when they killed him and they put the papers on him.
Hmm.
I mean, he was framed,
He
so,
was, yeah, okay.
so that was,
But there's lots of,
for someone like Lestrade, it's, he would jump to the conclusion that, West was
yeah,
was the villain, but, of course, Holmes is the one who, starts asking question. And, so digs deeper.
he always is there, and
Yeah.
Lestrade's always the first out, oh, we've got it solved, let's all go home, right? All right, Hugo Oversteen's house conveniently overlooks the track where the train stops just long enough to place the body there. Is that, this sound a little bit wishy-washy to you, or is that a good point of the story?
I think they must have had their schedules. So they stop at the same place pretty much at the same time for the same duration. That's it. Go ahead.
Of course, I was thinking is the way they described it as having done with Overstein being a vicious fellow. He unexpectedly hit him with his life preserver, that is his blackjack, and killed him that morning. They weren't planning this,
Right.
and they were in a panic. And they just did the thing that made the most sense at the time. If he hadn't lived next to the tracks, they would have found some other means, have dumped him in the Thames or something.
I suppose. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Good point.
If he
Yeah,
was
go
an
ahead.
international agent, that may have been a plan B getaway,
Ah.
you know, to not go out the front of the building.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. That's good.
Good point.
Okay, one more. Watson hiding a jimmy, a chisel, a dark lantern, and a revolver under his coat. Now, nobody's gonna notice all of this. I mean, it's going like-
Put it on later.
Clunk, 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 clunk.
Don't drop them, Watson.
I thought this was a weak point. Okay, Cass, it's time for the quiz. You take your pencils and get to your papers.
Pretty finished.
So, oh, can you click on that to make this play, or do I need to do that? Oh, I'd like for you to hear, it was mentioned that Holmes, releases the tension from his brain by working on the polyphonic motets of Elasa. Polyphonic, motet means polyphonic. You don't have to say polyphonic motets. It's like, saying, hot sunshine or something like that. It's a two-word thing you don't need. But let's see if I can pull this up and make it play. I'd love to.
You have to, it's not touch screen,
No, it's not touchscreen.
yeah, but you can use the
Maybe
mouse.
mine
there.
would be.
You can use the mouse. And there.
That's okay. Let's move ahead. I'll play later.
You
I
sure?
need to go on. Okay, let's watch the screen. It may come up there. Is it gonna come up? Here we go. You seeing it yet?
I'll have to unmute up there.
I see music.
Ah, here we go. Can you make it play? Is that this arrow?
Can I make it play?
We're gonna try to make this play.
There's an arrow.
Yeah, we're trying to get it up.
I clicked it, it's.
Okay, let's go ahead. It's not gonna work. We're good.
You wanna go
Alright.
back to the
Yeah,
presentation?
we're gonna finish the presentation now. We're gonna do our quiz.
Jim, are there any other copies of the quiz available?
Yes, we have several of you.
I got one, thank you.
You got it? Okay, you good? Ah,
Yeah, I've got.
you got one. Here you go.
Thank you.
You have a pencil?
Yes, thank
Okay, you're good.
you.
Go down to the quiz. Oh, here we go.
The sound of sounds.
All right. Here we go with the quiz. Are we ready? All right, first question. Holmes says it's fortunate for the community that I am not a, write it down, write it down, write it down. I'm not a crook, I'm not. That's what he said. Okay, second question. Which one is not a place that Mycroft frequents?
Victoria State.
No, we're just writing it down, Dave. Thank you very much. Do you have a paper and a pencil? That's what we're doing with it, okay? This is not an answer kind of thing, because we have a prize to, okay? Number 3, again and again, whose word has decided the national policy? We're just writing it down. We're not saying it out loud.
So when's,
It's not gonna happen.
Let's go one more step. What are we not doing? Saying the answer out loud. We're writing it down. Thank you very much.
Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah. Okay, number 4. What sound does a body make when it falls near the tracks at the top of a train? Actually, you're on top of a train. What does it make? Okay. Write your answer down however you need to write. And at the end of the story, Holmes has come from a certain place that's very popular in England, and he's been to see a certain gracious lady. Who is that? No answer. Write it down. Okay. The call girl from the pub, is that it? Number 6. Oh, here are the answers. All right, let's move right ahead. Okay. Yeah, round 2 of the quiz. Match the description with the person, place, or item. So here they are. At the right, you're going to write down if Aldgate is A, then you write that down. If it isn't, you write it down where it's appropriate. A clerk at Woolwich Arsenal. A small packet of technical papers. What would that be about? Write your answer down to the right of the word. A checkbook. That's pretty obvious, I think, but you might want to see about that. Works best from an armchair. Who would that be, please? Okay, yeah. That could be any of us, right? Now, the body was discovered where? Where was the body discovered? Write your answer to the right. Up there, thank you. And a Scotland Yard constable, you would know him, I'm sure. You have your answers in place. We're gonna move on. Oh, there's the answers. Okay, well, let's move on. Oh, okay, since it wasn't Holmes, who he himself said he wasn't a criminal, who were the 2 criminals involved in the story?
Well, that wrongly accused, so that's misleading. He wasn't really.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's. One of them is not the real criminal, but he thought he was. He actually was the deceased, wasn't he? Okay, here's the answer. Hugh Overstein was a spy and murderer, and Colonel Walter, traitor for personal gain, right? Remember him? Okay. All right, how did we do? Let's see, can we go back? Let's see how we did.
So you're saying Colonel Walker was wrongly accused?
Yeah. Wasn't that Valentine?
I'm confused on that. He was actually a traitor for personal gain, wasn't he, Walter? He was. Okay, if you want to self-judge your paper and see how you came up, what's the first answer? Criminal. Second answer, right? Third answer, Mycroft. Fourth, Thud. Everybody good?
As it says in the story.
That's right, that's why I put that in. Number 5.
Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria, okay, very good. A certain gracious lady. And let's go to the right side. Aldgate should have what beside it?
E.
Okay, what next?
D.
D and
F
and
B
A and
B
B and
C.
test, just.
Sounds like a Wordle game, doesn't it? You know? Okay. All right, and then the last one had two names. They would be,
Colonel offers. Colonel Walker.
okay, Oberstein and Colonel Walter. Yeah, I threw you a curveball now. Let's see what else we got here. I think we're done. We're trying to finish it. Now, this is
Hey,
cool. Watch your screen.
Hey, Jim,
Watch your screen. And we click it one more time, and what happens? Oh, my goodness. Uh-oh. Ooh, they're disappearing into the fog. Here we go. Fade to black. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. All right. Well, that's it for me, kids. I enjoyed it. I appreciate all the people who have decided to help me with it,
That was
and
great, Jim.
it was fun. It was fun, I think.
You don't want my limerick, Tim?
A pea soup and a book somewhere.
Here.
It's here somewhere.
Here's a pea soup.
Okay.
But where is the London Fog book?
Yeah.
Oh, here.
Here it is.
Dave's gonna take it home.
Maybe Marina.
If Marino's eating that here.
Yeah, right. Irene, thank you very much.
Jim, did you want my limerick or not?
I'm so sorry, Sandy, you are up with your limerick. Please lay it on us.
Okay. It's very short. There once was a man, Valentine, whose conduct was much less than fine. Holmes' brain on the track traced the facts quickly back and managed to trick Oberstein. The end.
Okay.
Some of you don't know who this lady is. Sandy Cozen lives in New Jersey. And I first met her at the Algonquin Hotel. I think she bought me a drink. She was hitting on me, you know. I mean, I was one of those Southern charming guys from Nashville. I guess that's not true, but anyway. And then when we started the Welcome Homes discussion group, which we had for several years, it's kind of fallen into disrepair, but Sandy was the arbitrator on that for me for years, and it helped to settle problems and make answers available. Ron Critter from Milwaukee, of all places, used to run it for me, the discussion leader, and we would have 12 to 1,300 people sign in a month. I mean, he could get a discussion going like nobody I've ever seen. We met Ron Critter in Chicago. We went up to, it was Gail Stahl, and it was Billy Fields and me and someone else. Thank you. And that was the night we were all in the same hotel room, and I was in my bed, and Billy was sleeping on the couch. And all of a sudden, Billy is, he's climbing over me. I'm trying to sleep. I said, Billy, go to hell. And so he was trying to get a pillow off the bed because he couldn't get to the bed unless you crawled over who was there. So it's been a story that's been around forever. Gail, are you still there? Where's Gail? Is he here? He's probably not there. Billy, thank you for your participation today.
Thank you.
Be here next. Car trouble, so he couldn't
I'll
come
do my
down to the
best.
mountain. All right.
Thank you. I will do that. She's out of the greenhouse.
Today. All right, thank you.
Ask David how he enjoyed his first meeting. Dave,
Yeah, it was good.
enjoy it. Come
Enjoyed
back. We're here every month.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, I'll try to get back.
We're here, what is the next meeting is August the 17th, and the story is, who's got the story? You got it, yes. And you're doing, you remember?
Norwood Builder.
Norwood Builder.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Norwood Builder. So come back with that, and we'll try to have a good time with it. All right, you are released. Thank you very much. Take care.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
See you then.
Dave, come here, one minute.
Okay, great.